session we're going into is Burdens of Identity. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Zeruya Shalev, Salma, Namita Gokhale, and Antara Dev Sen. This session is presented by the Embassy of Israel. I'd just like to remind you also, if you have your mobile phones, please turn them off or put them on silent. If you receive an urgent call, don't answer it here. Please go out of the venue so you don't disrupt the session. Thank you. Remind you that afterwards there will be signings in the signing area at the far left corner here at the front lawns. So if you would like to speak to the authors after the session and have your book signed, you can pick up their books at the Full Circle bookstore and follow them over to the signing area for that purpose. Thank you. Let's begin.
Okay. Good morning. Here we are about to talk about burdens of identity, all five of us, women. And it's not that, we'll just introduce ourselves. I am Antara Dev Sen. I edit a magazine called The Little Magazine. On my right is Namita Gokhale. Can we introduce ourselves? No? Okay. Namita Gokhale, as you know, is the director of this wonderful literary festival. Apart from that, she is also, of course, a very talented writer and translator and publisher. And we have Zeruya Shalev, who is an iconic writer in Hebrew from Israel. And here we have Salma, writes in Tamil, is again one of the brilliant voices from Indian literature in Tamil that we have today among the contemporary poets. She's primarily a poet. And Nagalakshmi is a publisher. She's going to help Salma in case Salma wants to speak in Tamil. Okay, so there we are. And I think we're still being fitted with our mics. Namita doesn't have, you're getting a voice, okay. So, burdens of identity, we were just right now, before coming on stage, we were wondering where to begin, because there are so many things to talk about when we are talking about identity, especially for a woman. A woman has so many identities that she needs to balance, and a woman writer particularly needs to probably balance many more identities. Now, if we begin with Salma, you're a Muslim woman writer in Tamil, and you have actually broken out. All of my authors here on the panel have been breaking out of their expected molds in their own brilliant ways. So Salma, you have broken out of your expected box, and as a writer, you got married at a very young age, and you had a different life before you decided to just find your own voice as a writer, and it did create problems, as I remember you talking about earlier, many years ago. Would you want to talk about that a bit? If you want to read out something first, that's also fine.
First I want to read. The identity of mine, a Muslim woman, writer and first Muslim women novelist and poet, has been a burden for me for years. Being a Muslim activist and feminist writer who has always been against the exaggerated ideologies of Muslims, I have faced immense threats in my life. At the same time, my identity has given me a wide range of topics to write. My identities has got me the words focus on me. In Tamil, there are plenty of writers, writings, novels and books, poems, but my writings got acclaimed use of my identity. It had not been a female writer from a Muslim community. I don't think my writings would not have been praised like as it is being praised now. My writings have been identified as women. It was one of the beginners from my community who has the audacity to write about a Muslim woman's sexual life and her sexual desires. The truth is my identities have been a burden and it has been a key to my success also. I was in a small village. I didn't finish my school, but my society is so alive. This is your life. After you get in house, you should not go out. You cannot go for study. You should get married. After that, everything is finished. This is the life of me. But I don't want to be like that. I want break the life, the rules. I want break all the rules. As a woman, as a Muslim woman, we have a lot of problem. The community is having all burden with us. எனக்கு இந்த லைஃப்பை வந்து எப்படியாவது உடச்சிட்டு வெளியில் வரணும் அப்படின்றது தான் என்னுடைய நோக்கமாக இருந்தது. அப்புறம் தான் நான் என்னுடைய ரைட்டிங்ஸ் ஆரம்பித்தேன். பொதுவாக அந்த முஸ்லீம் விமனாக இருக்கிறப்ப நிறைய விஷயங்களை கடந்து செல்ல வேண்டியிருக்கு. இது பெரிய கஷ்டமான ஒன்றுன்னு நினைக்கிறேன் நான்.
As a woman, first I wanted to break the shackles that bound me to this community and then start writing about what I felt.
Yes, Namita, you please go ahead. You have also been writing about sexuality and you just hold it like this. Namita, maybe you should just hold it like this.
I'm sorry, today the sound seems to be just going off.
Can you just hold it like this?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to tell you about these two women here, these three women, four women, but we'll begin with Zeruya, whose name I never know how to say properly. Go ahead and tell me how to say it.
No, it's Zeruya, it's perfect.
Zeruya.
Yeah.
Now, Zeruya lives in Israel and is one of the best-selling writers, absolutely iconic in that part of the world. Salma lives in Chennai. They come from religions that are not exactly the best of friends. They come from backgrounds that are completely different. She comes from a very cosmopolitan background. And Salma has broken every rule to get where she has. But you know, the problem with identity kits as we see it, and as Antara and all of us see when you come here, you see people are slotted as a best-selling writer, a revolutionary writer. But in the end, every writer within you, within us on the stage, the writer within, is struggling to get out of that immediate personal identity into a slightly larger space of knowing who we are, who we want to become, and who we want to be in terms of our understanding of the world. And there we have to leave something behind. So what I was interested in knowing in this session is who they were when they began, before they began writing, and who they became after the process of writing, transformative process of writing, made them see the world, both as women, as in terms of gender, nationality, sexuality, all these things, how they grew. And later I'd like to also share my
Why don't
experiences.
we start with you, with this, exactly this,
Okay,
how
so
you broke
with
out of
me,
your...
you know, it's something like this, that I'm from Kumaon in Nainital. And this is in the central Himalayas. It's a small little part of India, very, very protective. And I come from a Brahmin background where the Brahmins are very poor and so they are very proud. So it was constantly drummed into me that I'm a Kumaoni Brahmin girl. If people would ask me, what's your primary identity? And then I got married to a Marathi family, and I was just thinking about this the other day, what an alarming thing it is, you know, this custom over large parts of India, that when a girl gets married, she changes her name. And not that she changes her name, but the family she marries into changes her name. And that's the first subversion of identity, which we used to take in my generation quite. It was considered normal that you get married and the family you're marrying into changes your name. Well, they didn't change my name, but my surname gets changed. So that's the first transmutation of identity as a woman, that you take on your husband's name, which nowadays many women get long double-barreled names. So that is as a Kumaoni. As a Brahmin, it took me, there's a lot of pride fed into the Brahmin families which they carry on with. And it takes time to come to terms with the fact that actually maybe that Brahmanical pride was a bit misplaced. And that questioning began as a writer for me. And it's here in the Jaipur Festival, when I got so many Dalit writers heard them, listened to them, that I realized that having first got rid of the woman part of the identity, having tried to get out of it by writing a book, which a middle-class woman got into trouble writing, a middle-class housewife. They said, you are a middle-class housewife. How can you write this book, which is so sexually open? You must be promiscuous too. You must be adulterous too. So the identification of women writers with their bodies, then the whole, so we have so many shackles to break out of. And that's why I often say that if a Indian woman or a woman from a certain kind of background writes about herself, first she has to write about her body, because her body belongs in traditional terms to her husband, her family, her sons, and to write first about your body, then you can get to your mind, because that self-censorship which comes in with these identity kits is really troubling to many writers. So that's what I was coming from, and I'd like you both to pick it up.
Well, Salma did talk about how difficult it was for you to write about sexuality as a Muslim woman, and as you said, that if you were not a Muslim woman, then maybe the reception of your writing would have been very different, right?
Not only Muslim women, women should not write sexuality, about her sexuality and desire. In our whole society against women writings like that. I was last month in Canada. I was in a swimming pool with many clothes. I saw a lady, she is nude. She was having bath. That time I felt how the Indian society changed women body's burden. விமனோட பாடி வந்து எவ்வளவு வந்து ஒரு பர்டனான ஒரு விஷயமாக நம்மளை ஃபீல் பண்ண வச்சுருக்குங்கிறத அப்போ நான் ஃபீல் பண்ண முடியும். அவள் வந்து அந்த உடலை கடந்து போயிட்டா. ஷி கிராஸ் த பாடி, பட் வி ஆர் ஸ்டில் ஹேவிங் அவர் பாடி வித் அஸ் லைக் எ பர்டன், த ஐடென்டிட்டி, எவ்ரி திங்.
Yeah, when I saw the woman swimming nude, I thought that she has transcended her body. She has broken the confines of her body and she's got out of that. So I thought that that was something very unusual, and it's not so common to see that in an Indian situation.
நான் எழுத ஆரம்பித்தப்போ என்னுடைய கவிதையில் ஓப்பன் மை வெஜைனான்னு ஒரு கவிதையில் முடியும். அப்போது முஸ்லீம் விமன், ஒரு பெண் எப்படி வந்து இந்த மாதிரி எழுத முடியுன்றதுக்கு வந்து எனக்கு நிறைய ஒரு போராட்டம் ப்ராப்ளம்லாம் வந்தது. நிறைய ஒரு முக்கியமான ரைட்டர்ஸ் அவங்க என்னென்னா இந்த பொண்ணுங்களெல்லாம் கொளுத்தணுன்ற மாதிரியான ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்லாம் கொடுத்தாங்க, வந்து அப்படி எழுத முடியும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி. ஆனால் மற்ற பெண்களுக்கு கிடைச்சது வந்து ஒரு த்ரெட்டன்னா, எனக்கு ஒரு முஸ்லீம் எனக்கு வந்து இன்னும் கூடுதலான ரிலீஜியஸ் சைட்லேருந்து நிறைய த்ரெட்டன் என்னோடய நாவலுக்கும் கிடச்சிது. பட் இதெல்லாம் கடந்து தான் ஒரு எழுத்தாளர் வந்து எழுத முடியும்னு நான் நினைக்கிறேன்.
One of the poems I wrote ended with the word vagina. The kind of threats that I faced because of my Muslim identity was earlier the other women of other communities would have faced threats, no doubt, but in my case people wanted me to be burnt alive. That was the kind of reaction this poem caused for me.
நான் எழுத ஆரம்பித்தப்போ என்னோடய ஃபேமிலி சுத்தமாக ஏற்றுக்கிறவே இல்லை. என்னோடய ஹஸ்பண்ட் அண்ட் மதர் இன்லா அவங்க எல்லாருக்கும் என்னோட எழுத்து மேலே ஒரு பயங்கர கோபம் இருந்தது. முஸ்லீம் பெண் வந்து எப்படி எழுதலாம் அப்படின்றது, அவங்களுக்கு எழுதணுன்றது வந்து பெண் சிந்திக்கிறாங்கிறவுடைய தொடர்ச்சி அப்படி தான் யோசித்தாங்க. பட் நான் வந்து என்னுடைய பேரை அப்போ தான் சல்மான் நான் மாற்றிக்கினேன், என்னோடய இயர் நேம், என்னோடய உண்மையான பேரை. அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் எழுதி யாருக்குமே தெரியாமல் என்னோடய புக்ஸ் எல்லாம், என்னோடய ஃபேமிலிக்கே தெரியாமல் தான் என்னோடய புக்ஸ் பப்ளிஷ் ஆச்சு. அதுக்காக நான் நிறைய ஃபைட் பண்ண வேண்டியிருந்தது, நிறைய விஷயங்களை ஃபேஸ் பண்ண வேண்டியிருந்தது. பட் ஒன்லி பொண்ணாக இருந்ததுனால மட்டும்தான் அந்த மாதிரியான விஷயங்களை ஃபேஸ் பண்ண வேண்டியிருந்தேன்னு நினைக்கிறேன்.
When I started writing, my family, my mother-in-law and my husband were totally against the idea of me writing. How can a Muslim woman write? Yes, I had to fight with them to write, and then I assumed the pseudonym of Salma and then had to write without the knowledge of the family. And many of them were published without the knowledge of the family.
Many of my poems wrote in the toilet of my house. Toilet. I wrote in
Okay. So I sat in the toilet and wrote many of my poems.
My husband slept with me near, but I could not write in the night time. I don't want to waste my images. I have some thing right to the night time. But I went to the toilets. I am sitting there. I wrote the poems, and I came back and I save it in my bureau. Then after a few days, I sent it to the publisher. Published my poem. Everything has happened like that. Because of women, I faced lot of crisis. Because the women, the identities is very a burden of me a lot as a religious my way also.
Zeruya, how would you respond to this? Do you, as both of them have been writing about sexuality and trying to, as Namita said, that you have to first break out of the way that others confine you within your body, because others own your body, and you have to first own your body and talk about it, write about it, then come to talking about your mind. Is that the way that you would also feel, or is the identity as a woman not your primary identity? Is the identity as a writer? I mean, what shapes your identity as a writer?
Well, I was born in Israel. I was born Jewish. I was born a woman, and I can even say that I was born writing. I started to write when I was so young. I was 6 years old when I started to write my first poems, and so it became a major part of my identity before I could even understand it. But then I started to realize that I'm surrounded by expectations that I didn't want to fulfill. Like being an Israeli writer means to write about the establishing of the state, to write about the ongoing drama, the ongoing wars, the security situation, the conflicts between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I found myself resisting all those expectations and writing very intimate stories about the borders of the emotions, not the borders of nations, and about the war between sexes instead of the war between countries. And yes, my first novel was very daring, very erotic novel. It's called Love Life, and when I published it, it was, on the one hand, very popular in Israel, but on the other hand, it created very extreme emotional reactions. I remember people were yelling at me in the streets, how could I dare to write this daring novel? I remember one lady told me, she recognized me in the street next to my house and she said, oh, you are Zeruya Shalev? I just threw your new novel to the garbage can. And yes, it was very annoying, and also men got a bit frightened from this perspective of a woman, this female perspective that was very ironic and very unromantic. It was not what they have expected from me, and I think this was my way to resist Israel, to resist my life in Israel, because it is really very demanding, and I feel that my country is trying to control my life all the time in every step that I do, and my way of resistance is not to let her control my writing. And I think the most extreme example for that was that I was injured in a terror attack in Israel 10 years ago. Exactly 10 years ago, when I was walking on the sidewalk near my house, and a bus full of people exploded, and I was injured, and I couldn't write for half a year. I couldn't walk, I couldn't step for half a year. And I remember all my friends, my colleagues, many of my friends are writers, they all told me, well, you should write about it. You should put it in your novel, because it's a strong experience, and you suffer so much. So maybe it will help you to overcome this experience. And I refused, and I only I waited half a year until I completely recovered. And then I went back to the novel that I was writing at that time, and I completed the sentence that I stopped half a year ago, as if nothing happened. And I never mentioned it in any one of my novels until now. And I felt a little victory that this is my way to resist the political situation and its tragic consequences.
That's amazing, but because you are actually just wishing it away, you are actually refusing to acknowledge it, and by that you have control over a situation which otherwise would be controlling you. So that's a wonderful way of resistance. In fact, all three of you have been resisting imposed expectations that way. You from Zeruya, from the political situation. So in your case, Salma, it's probably the religious identity, the religion that
Social, I'd say.
Social and religion, the religious identity that makes the social identity so restrictive. You've been resisting that, and
Mine
in your
is
case,
just the comfort of the middle class,
the middle class and woman.
which is the most insidious comfort. I mean, you don't know how deeply you're imprisoned within that.
Well, I'm sure we know, actually.
No, in the sense, it's not a recognizable terror, but
it is a terror, nevertheless. Yes, it's also, I think it's more so for women, because middle-class women are supposed to be the repositories of their identities, of the cultural identities, their social identities, because there's the home and the outside world kind of thing, and the world belongs to men. Even if women are working outside, somehow the home is your space, and that is where your identity is safe. So women, as
the Bharatiya Nari,
the Bharatiya Nari, the Indian woman, needs to keep that place safe.
Because
and
I'll
therefore
tell
your
you
identity.
two funny stories. One was that we were in Jerusalem together, she and I, on a panel. And we had already been friends, we'd met at various places, and our subject of our session had been something to do with sexuality. Now, a very kind gentleman came on stage, and he said, no, that was an accident, that's not the subject of the session. And he came up with some completely different name, and then we got on stage, he said, no, that is the subject of our session. And he just got so poor, man, got very embarrassed.
Did he stay or did he just leave?
I think he enjoyed the session. He came back,
Enjoyed
he
the
said
session.
he did the right
Okay,
thing.
that's good.
So,
Good spot. So all
and-
three of you
yes,
have been
and in
writing
fact,
about.
the first time I met Salma was equally astounding, because I was in the Frankfurt Book Fair with Salma, and I was with this very confident young woman wearing blue jeans, and we went to Wiesbaden to a bookshop outside for a reading. And that, if I can say, if anything is the complete opposite of anything, that reading is the complete opposite of this one. Because here I can just see a sea of thousands of faces and listeners. We were driven for half an hour to Wiesbaden, where there were 4 of us in the car and the audience was 2.5. The 2 people were the people who owned the organic shop cum bookstore, and half was their dog. And they weren't terribly interested in us. And we just sat. Then I said, let's talk to each other. So we went on, pretended it was a panel, and I interviewed Salma. That's why we became such good friends. And you don't know the struggle she's been through. And after that, she became a member of the Panchayat. And it was really India's political system in a way that empowered her. Because when they had women's reservations there, she became the MLA from there. And then I said, what happened to your burqa? What happened to your family? She said, Namita, you know something? Power changes everything. And this was Salma's.
And one more thing I want to share here. I was one MLA candidate in our state. Our regional party gave a seat for me. Was contested in my area. I have a chance to win, but all the religious people, they don't give me a chance. She will spoil our society. After she can win, she will spoil our society. We should work against her. They all are doing one thing. They are, my novel copy is here. Some kind of sexuality and these women issues I have written here. They are did the photocopy. They are distributed all the Muslim community, Muslim people, every house they are giving this paper. What kind of women she is here, the candidate. We should not allow to win her. We should vote against her. Then I lost only 1,000 votes. The power that they know also, we should not allow to her to win. She should not get any power. She will do something against this community level problems and the religious things. They are afraid about that. I lost.
You lost. Huh?
Yeah, only 1,000.
Well, she lost by very... The political power is not the power that writers seek, actually. They seek a power over themselves, over their mind, the power of freedom and of freeing other people. And, I'd like to know also about Zeruya somewhere, that she comes from a family, as I understand, of one of the most foremost literary families, where there are writers spilling out of every drawer, each more famous and distinguished than the other. How do you cope with that is what I'd like to know. Because that's also the burden of expectations.
Within the family also, because
family,
you're
which
constantly
even
being
Antara
compared.
could talk about.
Never mind.
But, yeah.
Well, yes, there is a lot of politics even in the family, inside.
Tell us how many writers there are in your family, if you can.
Yes, well, in my family it is very crowded, since my father used to be a literary critic, my uncle used to be a very famous poet, my brother is also a writer, my cousin is a very famous writer, and I even married a writer, so... And my parents-in-law are also writers, so you cannot believe it. It's really so crowded. But somehow, I think since I grew up this way, I think I got used to it. And I feel, well, I guess it was one of my first struggles to find my own way within all those writers around me. And my way was this personal, intimate way of dealing with the individual, with its own world, and then I think it became more universal than I expected, because I was only interested in the inner world and not in the ongoing drama around me. I wanted to create my own dramas, and somehow it really became universal, and in many other countries people could identify with it, and it was really a great surprise for me. But I think since all the other writers in the family were male writers, and I was the only female writer in the family, I guess I choose kind of female way, which was a bit more domestic and a bit more connected to the emotional world, to the conflicts of the emotional worlds and the conflicts of the relationships between ourselves and our families.
It's interesting because you are talking about, as a writer, how you make connections between the families, within the family, and between families and between friends. Salma, you have also made connections through your writing most writers do that anyway, through a wider community of maybe, Muslim women who cannot speak out the way that you have very courageously been able to do.
But
now,
what I was trying to say was that somewhere you have to get above that.
Exactly.
The next step is to stop writing as a woman. Because, and I want to know how, and I haven't been able to do it. Somewhere I came back to saying, after all these years of trying to write like a man or a non-man or something, I came back, yes, I'm a woman writer. So I really want to know how you feel about that identity kit. Are you a woman writer or are you a writer?
Well, well, I'm a woman and I'm a writer. I don't think it makes me a woman writer. It is not an automatic status, I believe. Because when I write, I feel just like Virginia Woolf said, when I write, I feel androgynous. And I can write in a perspective of a man, and I can feel I'm a man. My last novel, The Remains of Love, has one of the major protagonists is a man, a lawyer for human rights. And when I wrote from his consciousness, I could identify with him as if I am a man. And when I wrote about an 80 years old woman, I was 80 and I was her. So I think this is our ability as writers to maybe like actors, that we become the people we are writing about them. And in this way, it really doesn't matter if I am a man or a woman. I think the only thing that matters even as a reader, not only as a writer, the only thing that matters is if the book is well written or badly written. And I try to ignore all the other questions.
Yeah, I'm not even sure whether you can actually write not as a woman. Because, as you said, as a writer, you're writing in various voices and various narratives. And there you can write as a man, a woman, a child, a Dalit person, an invalid, a warrior, whatever identity that your character wants to pick up. And I'm sure that is the success of a good writer, that the writer makes that character believable. But at the same time, if a woman is writing, whether you admit it or not, I think the experiences that shape your writing somehow just remain there. It might be expressed in the sensitivities that you have, in a certain turn of phrase, in a certain description. I'm not sure that it is possible to avoid all of that, or whether it is even necessary to avoid all of that. I mean, you don't always have to write as a woman, as a feminist, or as a woman writing about the body, absolutely. But I guess once you are a writer.
I'm still, as I said, puzzled, but I think there is, because more interior experience for a woman because of the range of available experience, and they tend to be more interior. Men like to write about wars and legislation because they have more access to those worlds, or science fiction because of the sort of education and orientation, or whether it is inner sensibility because women have a different sort of creativity. They have a biological creativity of being of having children, of being able to throw something out of themselves. I am puzzled, and this session is too short to talk about it. It needs a lot of groping and finding out.
You wanted to read out something in response to what Namita and Zeruya were saying. Yes.
A writer is someone who has a universal point of view. I have been marked as a women writer, feminist writer, Muslim writer, an Indian Muslim writer, Tamil Muslim writer, and so on. All these different marks queue up behind a writer. I feel some marks are essential at certain situations. For instance, there is a world of experience that opens when a woman writes about her own experience. And such detailing can be achieved only when a writer identifies with a certain territory and marks it as her own. That way, constructions of identities go hand in hand with the creation of new histories. But if one gets stuck like a tap in one identity and one is expected to articulate from within the boundaries of an identity, then it becomes very limiting. At this point, I have a few big questions before me. Who is a writer? Are specific identities integral to a writer's existence? What are the borders of one's writing? It's not as though the writer herself has created an identity, but it is the reader who recognizes and brands a writer as having a certain identity. Just as genders are constructed by the society, various identities are socially constructed. After a point, it is important for a writer to transcend all restrictions because any label can be limiting. For example, if Muslim women are represented in a certain manner, it also separates them from the rest of womanhood. And isolates them rather than giving them a chance to be one with it. It makes you depressed at times to feel thus limited. And hence it's important to overcome and set yourself free. And in this quest, both the writer and the reader must participate, as it is not possible for the writer alone to set herself free and remain a writer if her freedom is not received well. If I am at all the time looked as an advocate of women and Muslim women in particular, it looks as though I am not capable of articulating anything else. I would like to be a writer for humanity and not just for women.
Yes, that's a wonderful note to probably end this part of the discussion. If maybe we can throw it open to the public. Yes, there is a question there and there, I can see.
And there, many questions.
I just wanted to know your thoughts on the word respect and women getting respect, and I've heard about the expression earning respect, but I think I'm talking about also within the home sphere, the family sphere. I just wanted to know your thoughts because you're writers, you found a voice. There are many of us who haven't yet found a voice. So maybe advice or thoughts or any comments on a woman getting respect.
I think women are not conditioned sometimes to demand respect. And so they suffer from trying to be all things to all people simply because that is the role of the homemaker, and it's a very essential and vital role. And I did a book called In Search of Sita. And I think that book talked about how Indian women have been made vulnerable, because in any situation where a 9 months pregnant woman is left alone in a forest to have a baby, that's the first lack of respect which has been given religious sanction. Once we start questioning these larger woundings and insults to womanhood, which are prescribed by almost religious sanction here, we get back to the Durgahood or the other forms of respect that are available to us within social constructs. But I'd rather hear both of them now tell me.
No, I can just say that at least in my country, things are really getting better. When I grew up, when I started to write, there were only few women writers, and the male writers were much more influential. And in the last 10, 20 years, things are really getting better. There are leading female writers in Israel. I mean, on the one hand, I don't like this division. I think we should be treated as just as writers, not as female writers, but still many women are writing in Israel and becoming successful writers. It is not yet an equal society, but I think there is a great progress in the last 2 decades. And I'm proud to be part of this progress, and I feel we are in the right way now. So maybe some good news for the end.
What about you?
சொசைட்டி பெண்ணை ட்ரீட் பண்ணுற விதமே சரியாக இல்லைன்னு தான் நினைக்கிறேன். அதாவது ஜெண்டர் ஈக்குவாலிட்டிங்கிறத பற்றி நம்ம பேச வேண்டிய ஒரு கட்டாயம் இப்போ இருக்குது. ரெஸ்பெக்ட் அவங்க கொடுத்து வாங்குகிற ஒரு விஷயம் இல்லை, அது தானாக அந்த சமூகத்தில் உருவாகக்கூடிய ஒரு தாட்ஸில் மாற வேண்டிய ஒரு விஷயம் நான் நினைக்கிறேன்.
What she says is what Namita had said earlier, that we have to demand respect. The society may not give us, but then we have to make that demand and make sure we get it.
We should get, the society should change their mindset. Gender equality, we should think about the gender equality.
And I think respect is something that it's not peculiar to women demanding. I think any individual in any position of any gender would want some respect. Yes, but yes, I know you're third. She's second. Her hand had gone up, and then you. Okay, you want to go ahead right now? You've got the mic, and then we'll come here.
Hi, I'm Varsha. I just have a comment to make about the burden of identity. As a woman, I feel our identity is our strength. Look at the strong women. All of you have broken barriers to be where you are, and you've stepped into the main bastion, naturally away from what we are intended to do when we are born as a woman. So why call it burden? I think it should not be a burden. Our identity should be our strength. So that's the only comment I want to make. If anybody wants to respond, I'll welcome it. All of you are such strong women. And I'm so proud to be a woman also, but why a burden? Our identity is our strength. Ma Janani. Antara, you'll explain that for me, maybe.
Well, thanks, Varsha. I think it's a wonderful point. Identity is our strength. But I think what we are talking about here is that sometimes we might feel completely smothered by the expectations that identity sort of puts on you. And you need to get out of those confines. That is the burden. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So identity, and we might all be proud of our identity, but then that's one way of looking at it. The other, of course, is that there are social expectations which are not so good because they slot you in boxes. So you have to come out of those little boxes, and that is when it becomes a burden to, when you're constantly saying, yes, I'm a woman, but, yes, I'm a Hindu, but, yes, I'm a Muslim, but, you know, I mean, that is the burden, I think that, or in the case of these fabulous women writers who have been writing on sexuality, among other things, there might be a burden of expectation where, you know, I mean, suppose any of them talks about writes a tome on very serious political issues, and then they say, oh, but she's the woman who was writing about a vagina, and there she is now. Should we take it seriously? So there are all these other aspects that also come in.
Yes,
Would you want to respond?
No, I agree that maybe burden is the wrong word. Somebody else, in fact, when we were programming said burden. Is that the right word? But then some people said, let's go on with it. So you could say hurdles of identity, I guess, instead of burdens. There was another question somewhere, because
Yes.
who has the mic?
I'm glad that point was made because I'll build upon it. Do you really think that your identity has taken you back from writing? Because from what I feel is that being a Kumauni Brahmin, and knowing that identity before even you know the word identity has given you a perspective to write. Being a Tamil Muslim female has given you a perspective to, to write, and because of that conditioning, you could write something that was heartfelt.
True.
Vis-a-vis the cosmopolitan culture that we have, where there's no sense of heritage, so to say. I mean, I'm not generalizing, but in majority. The literature that comes out of there is very, shall I say, Bollywoodish masala. I mean, there's no depth, there's no struggle in the protagonist's story. I think.
What is the question?
My question is that, this really?
I
mean,
understood
has
the
it
question.
helped?
I think it's an excellent question. And it's a very much a part of the whole thing, because when you really go deeper into who you are, then you understand and appreciate. So it's not a rejection, but of moving beyond, and so that you don't get imprisoned only in that basic identity. As a writer, it may work if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer and all that, to stay to that basic identity. But somewhere as a writer, I think to get a larger and more universal point of view, and then use that local identity, the primary identity, but to peg yourself somewhere. What do you feel?
Do you want to respond? Either of you want to respond to that question?
நான் ஆரம்பத்தில் அதை பற்றி சொல்லியிருக்கேன். அந்த முஸ்லீம் விமனாகவும் தமிழ் விமனாகவும் முதல் நாவலிஸ்டாகவும் இருக்கிறனால கிடைச்ச அடையாளங்கள்ங்கிறது வேறு. அதையும் தாண்டி நம்ம வேறு அந்த அடையாளங்களை தாண்டி போகிறது தான் நம்ம முக்கியம்னு நினைக்கிறேன். ஆஸ் ஏ ரைட்டர், அது எல்லா விஷயங்களையும் நம்ம தொட முடியும், எல்லா விஷயத்தையும் எழுத முடியும்னு ஒரு ரைட்டர் ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். நமிதா சொன்னது மாதிரி டாக்டர், டீச்சர், லாயர், இவங்களுக்கெல்லாம் நம்ம சொல்ல முடியாது இல்லையா அடையாளங்கள்.
See, the very beginning I have said that as a Tamil woman and a Tamil Muslim woman, I have tried to transcend this identity. Now we don't ask these questions of other professionals, doctors or lawyers, as Namita had said. So my idea is to go beyond these labels that give me an identity.
And Zeruya one, and the mic goes there. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the problems with identity is that we cannot choose it. I mean, I was born Jewish, I was born a woman, I was born an Israeli. So sometimes it is like being in jail, especially when you are surrounded by masculine expectations. But then, of course, overcoming all those expectations and finding your own way, it's a great feeling of yes, of small, modest victory. And I think we are all struggling with the same expectations, and we all enjoy our small, intimate victories.
So,
Okay.
sorry, I had a
Oh.
question.
I think, yeah, just 1 second. It's that gentleman there, and then we come to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Really enjoyed the session. Unfortunately, I came late, so maybe this point was covered. I'd like to know what your families or any other people who are objecting a lot initially think after they see that you have been very successful. Salma, உங்க வீட்ல ஃபேமிலில என்ன நினைக்கிறாங்க நீங்க நல்லா சக்சஸ் ஆன அப்புறம்?
Now I'm very famous writer in Tamil Nadu in India. The family is happy about that only for famous, not for my writings. They don't like, still they don't like my writings. I'm not a good writer.
Zeruya, you want to answer that question? How does your family respond to your writing?
Well, I remember the night where I came to my parents' apartment with the first copy of Love Life, which is a very daring erotic book, and I left it for my father to read, and then I came home and I started to shake. I was so frightened, and only then I realized that my own father, I didn't care about my husband so much, but only about my father, that he's going to read this book this night. And I was so frightened. And I called my mother and I asked her, what shall we do? He's going to read this book. And she said, don't worry, I will read it first and I will mark the most erotic scene that he will not be able to read it. But then I thought maybe he read only those marked scenes.
My son,
What the same. So when I was very young, I was 26 when this novel came out. It was called Paro, Dreams of Passion. And my father saw the manuscript. He said, Dreams of Passion? I hope you've been discreet, child. And I said, I don't do discreet. So these things happen, parental expectations turning to strength. So I think everybody copes with these things, man, woman, child. But Antara, I think there are other questions eagerly waiting.
Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful session, and I feel in a way my question is going to bring it down from the little lift that it's just had, so sorry about that. But thinking about identity and thinking about how you have said you'd like to transcend your identities, where you came from and go to another place. But so much of your identity as a writer is the influence that you've had as writers from other writings, from, you are framed by this whole culture of writing, Zeruya, Namita, you come from a background, Salma, with the richness of Tamil writing and Tamil women writing. So I just wondered if any of you had a comment about the writer, the identity, your identity, and the influence of other people's writings on it. So.
What is the text that influenced you, mean? Yeah. You asked me, and I hadn't thought through this question, and sometimes zing, something goes in your head. What is the text that influenced me the most? And you will all be surprised, really surprised by the answer that came to me, which was the Hanuman Chalisa. Because it's a text that gives actually, it's unexpected because it's a religious text. But in my worst moments of stress and fear, that is what has given me, both because of its beautiful poetry and its meter, but by the sort of pragmatic strength that it represents. It's really given me a lot of strength through my life. So you come back to where you began, really.
I think my icon at the beginning and until now is Virginia Woolf, but not only because she was a woman. I think mainly because of her style, because of her nuances, and because of her great talent.
Salma, what are the influences?
Yes, in my writings, I have the same situation in Anna Akhmatova, in Russian poet. She was in the Stalin period in the prison. She could not write house prison. She could not write anything. She inspired me a lot. I want to write. They have life threatening, but they are doing that kind of job. Why should not be? I'm doing my work.
That's a brilliant question because Andal really is her predecessor in a literary tradition. What about you? What do you feel, Antara? Do you feel to this question? What is your response?
I feel that there are so many influences. It's difficult for a writer, probably, to be fair to the writer, it's probably difficult to pinpoint. You can give glimpses. But yeah, I mean, I'm very surprised and very happy that each of you could actually come up with something very concrete, because when I heard the question, I thought, oh my God, there are so many things that influence you, you know, I mean, not, as you said, Virginia Woolf, but not just because she's a woman. There are so many male writers and so many other texts, including religious texts, like you said, like the Hanuman Chalisa, which you wouldn't even think about.
I wouldn't have. Normally. If you'd given me time, I would have said Dostoevsky or something like that, you know.
But that's the response.
Yeah,
yes,
more questions.
there are 3 questions here. Who has the mic? Actually, yes, I had...
2 minutes?
Yes, and after that, lady here in front, she has been also asking for the mic for a while.
With due respect to the panel, I'd like to say that you have actually risen like phoenixes. And with that in mind, I'd just like to ask Namita ma'am that literature is a part of revolution. But for an everyday woman, what is the first step that she should take? And secondly, how should she assure herself that she is not moving towards the unknown grasp of nothingness by the end of it?
You know, I would say the book that did make a transformation in many people's ideas like this is In Search of Sita, for an Indian woman, I'm saying, because that's a book of resistance, because when you look at Sita and the character of Sita, you see how she was one of the most nurturing, generous individuals possible, who went with her husband into exile and did, and is so much a part of the expectations around us. But if you remember the second Agni Pariksha, where she said no, I think that's where you learn, because every Indian woman has Lakshman Rekhas and Agni Parikshas. And if you remember that in Sita's second Agni Pariksha, she learned to draw her own boundaries and to say, this far, beyond that nobody can come and impose upon my strength. So that's my advice, just go back to the second Agni Pariksha of Sita. I think else? One more question or we are closing?
Do you
one
want
more
to
question.
respond to that or no?
There's
No, you please go ahead. You've been asking. No, we'll take 2 questions.
As an activist, I would like to say that every woman in each profession, maybe she is writer, engineer, or professor or doctor, we have to, in this world of inequality, where gender equality is not yet achieved, we have to prove us and we have to work more hard to establish ourselves. And the courage and the patience we should keep. This is the message I get from your discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
There was one young man
young,
who talked
young
later.
gentleman here. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. My question's open to all of you. Whilst you were getting criticized for your writings and denatured about your identity, I mean, what is the importance of an identity to an individual?
That is too long and difficult a question.
To answer in 30
1
seconds.
minute.
Yes.
It's your core. Everybody needs a core self. And if that core self has not come from within, but it's been thrown at you from outside expectations, whether you're a man or a woman or another gender. But if your inner self is at conflict with the self that society is expecting it of you, then you have a problem. And a lot of trouble comes from it. If both are in the same place, you're in a deeply victorious situation in every sphere, is what I feel.
Yes, thank you. Should we, if it's a very small question, we'll take it, otherwise no.
No, I think no.
Huh?
The next she's saying no.
No, no? Okay, no, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry. Wait.
You
Perhaps
got
you
up too
want to-
late, Professor.
I'm afraid we do have to wrap up, but I might suggest that you take any other questions to the book signing tent. The authors will be there with their books, so please do go and join them if you'd like to continue this discussion, which has been a most enlightening and powerful one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Zeruya Shalev, Salma, Namita Gokhale, and Antara Dev Sen. This session was proudly presented by the Embassy of Israel. Delusions. That's Hussein Haqqani.